Hey everyone, it is I, your host McLateral, aka McLateral FF on the Twitter. I'm very excited to be with you guys. Already did an awesome show with Thor Nystrom from NBC Sports Edge. You guys should definitely go check that out. But after this show, because tonight we have some awesome guests. We have Angelo from Angelo Analysis. We got Bob Harris from Football Diehards, from Sirius XM Fantasy. The man is a legend. I probably don't even need to introduce him, but it's the job, so I'm going to do it anyway. So I was going to have an opening monologue, and then the whole Cole Beasley news broke. My partner in crime, Herms, my friend and colleague and co-founder here at the Lateral, really, the thing was even his idea, to be honest. He's down with that second shot right now, a little under the weather, so unfortunately he's not going to be joining us tonight. So no surprise at the end, unfortunately. But I just want to say, get your shot. It'll be good for you. Trust me. And I actually work for a biotech company that works with some companies that develop some of these vaccines. I am not an expert, but if anyone here who is listening to this has any questions, any hesitancy about the vaccine at all, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I will talk to you with respect, with dignity, answer any questions you have, not judge you on your decision, but all I want is to help you out, because I think it's really important that everyone gets this shot. And so the whole Cole Beasley thing really just made me think that it was important to just say, the goal is to make sure no one is dying from this thing anymore. So however we got to go about that, maybe it'll take longer to convince some people that this vaccine's a good idea. Maybe some people can be convinced right away. Luckily, with the CDC announcing that it's going to be safe to walk around without masks on indoors and outdoors, people maybe will feel a little more incentivized to go ahead and get that vaccine, because that is really what makes it safe. It is safe if you have the vaccine. It is not safe if you don't. But anyway, at this point, I'm sure I'm rambling. But again, if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me on Twitter. I am happy to help. But on to the football, and on to my first guest, who is the one, the only, Angelo from Angelo Fantasy. Dude, how is it going?
It's going great, man. It's finally starting to get warm out here in Chicago. We did the right thing, traded up to get Justin Fields too. I'm a big Bears fan, so I could not be doing much better.
Well, that is good. And I have to say, I don't think it's ever been a better time, or it hasn't been this good of a time to be a Bears fan in a while. I mean,
Agreed.
Justin Fields, is it possible that Justin Fields already is the best quarterback that your franchise has ever had?
Yeah, I don't think it's kind of funny because he hasn't even played an NFL snap yet. But I mean, literally the choice is him or Jay Cutler. So I mean, it's really not. You're not
no love for McMahon, no love for Sexy Rexy.
Jim McMahon. I mean, that was Walter Payton, Otis Wilson, the defense.
Fridge
Perry.
Absolutely.
Man, there's a lot of legendary characters on that whole entire team too. But yeah, I mean, it finally feels really good to get a legitimate, blue chip type talent at the quarterback position in Chicago. I mean, we were hoping for Russell Wilson for a while. And I, like many, were a little upset when we settled for Andy Dalton. I didn't think Ryan Pace and that brass were gonna, trade up and be aggressive, but they did. So I'm happy with it. So we'll see how it goes.
I think my favorite story that came out of that was the Bears signed Andy Dalton because they knew the Seahawks liked him and that would make the trade easier. Hilarious. I heard that floating around the internet, and I'm just like, look, if that's true and they know that, all the more power to them, but I can't imagine that's the case. Well, talk about blue chip talent. We've got a blue chip talent in you here tonight, and a thing or two about blue chip talent, but because you are the creator of Angelo Analysis. It's a phenomenal player evaluation website, focuses on NFL incoming rookies for the most part. You don't delve really into the vets, correct?
Not as much. I tend to focus a lot of, my time and energy and my content on, who's coming into the NFL. And I'm a big fantasy football fan too. So I try to put a fantasy spin on it as well. When we're talking about, dynasty rookie rankings, I did a draft guide, did the Ascension draft guide, got that out there a couple weeks ago. But yeah, man, I mean, it's been a lot of fun doing it. So I'm looking forward to keeping it going.
Awesome. Well, how'd you get your start in fantasy football?
Oh man, in fantasy football, I guess I was 16 years old, so a little while ago. My buddies and I are all big football fans, and we wanted to do a league together. So we did. It was IDP scoring. It was like half point PPR, one QB, and my team was awful. Like, this is the only league I've ever had where I took last. Like, my team could not be. I took Reggie Bush in the first round. It was my first ever fantasy pick was Reggie Bush. I think it was rookie Reggie Bush too.
Oh wow! So probably a little bit of a reach then, going with the
a lot of it
Reggie
reach.
Bush.
My best receiver was Johnny Knox. That's who my best receiver was.
You might have been better off with Johnny Knoxville, if I'm being honest.
I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was. I mean, it's fun to look back and laugh on it, but man, like that was. It was a pretty fun start to my fantasy career, I should say. But I like to say it went a little bit more uphill from there. But yeah, that's how I got my start, is just getting my ass kicked essentially in my first ever fantasy league.
And you got your start playing IDP. That's really interesting. I don't think we've actually had someone with that being their first
I've never played it
experience.
since, actually, which is funny.
How did it feel getting thrown into the deep end like that?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, it was funny because like I didn't know much about fantasy football at all when I was 16. I watched a ton of NFL games. But, like, I didn't know. Like, I picked my favorite players. Like, I literally I picked the guys I liked and couldn't be more wrong. The second year I did a little better. I think we moved like the 6th place. But yeah, man, it was thrown in the absolute deep end. Now we can't even, now we have like, if you threw me in a best ball league when I was 16, I could, you could float a little bit more, but straight up in the IDP, man, it was tough, man. My friends are some total sharks too with that stuff too. So it was
had no mercy.
No, not at all, man. I got made fun of for years. Still do, I still get made fun of for the Reggie Bush pick to this day.
Well, hopefully you weren't quite as thrown into the deep end when it came to creating fantasy content. So when it comes to that, how'd you get your start? Was like player evaluation like the first thing, like your first love, and you just kept running with it? Or did you start somewhere else and then decide to move into that?
That's a great question. So for me, player evaluation is kind of my first love, I would say, because that's a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I work in sport and human performance, as you probably know. But for me, like my day-to-day is being really hands-on with athletes and practitioners and just being able to see high-level athletes move up close and help them solve problems. So for me in my career, like I evaluate talent on a day-to-day basis. For me, I slow down film, take still shots, and analyze different aspects of human locomotion. And I'm a total nerd with all this. And I also use data to kind of help me make decisions for my own athletes, to basically say, hey, this is where we're at this point in the year. This is how kind of our force velocity profile looks. This is what we need to kind of increase, decrease, put in training, take out, things of that nature. So for me, a lot of my own career is combining film and data, which is kind of funny because that's what I tried to do on the website as much as I can and in fantasy football. But yeah, I originally just started on Twitter, just created an account, and just put my thoughts on NFL prospects. I think my first one I've ever did was why David Montgomery, and it was before he ended up being a Chicago Bear, but right after he came out of Iowa State, and then Miles Sanders at Penn State, and then a couple other guys, Josh Jacobs, obviously in that class, Darrell Henderson. And so I started focusing on those 4 guys first, and then I kind of branched out from there.
Well, that goes a long way as to explaining why you are so good at it. You have that Gladwellian 10,000 hours, clearly, with it being your day job and your passion here with your fantasy analysis. Do you have any advice for new content creators? As someone who has done objectively a very good job with it so far?
Thank you. Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing I tell people all the time is just find something you really like and you're passionate about, and just find a lane. I mean, this is a narrow but broad field. There's a lot of things you can do in fantasy football. There's a lot of different, variations in terms of, formats, things of that nature. But for me, I think the biggest thing I can tell people is just find a lane. If you really want to do this as a hobby, passion, or potential, employment opportunity one day, find a lane, stick to it, create your own niche, and then just kind of go from there and just try to be great at whatever you do. I mean, for me personally, like I just try to be myself and do that the best I can every single day. So that's what I kind of encourage everybody to do, is just be yourself and just provide something unique for people to kind of see and lean on.
Makes a ton of sense. I think it's great advice. I would say something that a lot of people in the industry will tell you is definitely to find your lane, find your brand, find what you're good, and more importantly, find what you're passionate about.
Right.
Because if you're just good at it, but you have zero passion for it, it's not going to work out.
Yep.
Now, let's get into what you're passionate about, which is the analysis. So I saw on your website, you have the Ascension grading system. I'm assuming a proprietary grading system for you. How did you develop that? How'd you land on your key metrics?
Man, so for me, I landed on the metrics based on like things I thought like of the overarching skill set of both receivers and running backs. And that's what I really focused and honed in on. So like things that they do really well. So like, for example, like Travis Etienne's a top shelf accelerator. So he gets bonus points essentially for being a top shelf accelerator. So the way I did it is I did it essentially 70% film, 30% analytics. The system itself uses bonuses for elite metrics and traits. So like I said, Travis Etienne being an elite level accelerator in my opinion. So he gets, instead of a 5 out of 5, that's what the grading system's out of, it's out of 5. He gets a 7.5 out of 5. He gets a bonus for it.
Okay.
And so that's how it works, because for me, my goal is to always magnify the traits that the NFL is going to magnify when they see these players. Like, what do these guys do that's going to keep them on the field, consistently to score us fantasy points for 4 or 5 plus years, especially at the running back position. But for receivers, guys like Jamar Chase, I mean, this guy's going to be scoring points for us for a decade. So looking at what he does and how an NFL team can potentially view him and how we should view him in terms of the fantasy outlook that he has. And then analytically, same thing. If a prospect has elite level analytic metrics, those are graded the same as the film metrics in terms of bonuses. So for example, you have a guy like Jamar Chase, like Rondale Moore's a great example in terms of breakout age. I mean, he's one of the earliest breakouts we've had, especially in the Big Ten, performing how he did against elite level competition at Ohio State, when they had those good corners and those great defensive backs there, and him kind of taking over that game. That's kind of one of the most fun watches I've ever had, is watching him take over that Ohio State game when he was a freshman. But that's kind of how the AGS kind of works. And then it's basically just a combination of film review and data analysis to just kind of help mitigate risk, and then just essentially just recognize a prospect's career potential. That's kind of how I use it. And then it's kind of tier-based in terms of grading. So is this player a gold jacket caliber prospect, or is he an above average NFL starter? Recognizing that and seeing, where these guys land as well is really important for me to kind of look at and kind of give them a grade based on all those factors.
No, I saw that. I like that a lot, because it's like a comp, but not a comp. You're not saying like this player is going to be like player X, but you're going to say like, yes, I think this player has the talents to be this style, this level, this caliber of player.
Right.
How'd you land on the 70-30 split between film and stats? That was something that I was curious about.
Yeah. So what I did is I graded 10 metrics for film. Then I graded 5 for analytics. So for me personally, I am much more well-versed in film, in watching. That's kind of me. I'm a visual learner. I've used data in my day job a ton to make decisions. But I don't use those as kind of my tiebreaker, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So it's basically a 2/3, 1/3 split, the 10 versus the 5 out of 15. And then you just gave the edge a little to the film because, this is what I'm better at.
Yeah.
This is what I trust more.
Exactly.
All makes sense. Speaking of things you trusted in your analysis, is there anything that you've updated as you've gone through it over the years? Anything where you were like, wow, I was really wrong on this, or I really missed this, and then changed it as you set up your AGS?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, honestly, was how I used data and how, I think for me, originally it was mostly just film, just mostly how I saw things, gotcha, my eyes. But as I got deeper and deeper into my own career, as well as deeper in the fantasy football space, I realized how important using both of those things is, to basically just to mitigate risk. And that's kind of how I used it. So like there's certain prospects that on film, like I just don't like them very much at all. Mm-hmm. But data wise, analytically, it backs up that these guys are pretty good prospects. So I have to kind of go back and take a look and see, hey, did I miss anything here? And then if those guys get draft capital as well, like what did that NFL team see in that prospect and what kind of role will they play at the NFL level to kind of help them succeed with consistency?
So actually speaking of like how players are selected by the NFL, how do you select a player to create a player profile, a Y player X as it were?
It's a great question. So normally how I do it is I tend to kind of take, I would say the 10 or 15 most, I would say the prospects that kind of get the best draft capital, like that we're projecting to get the best draft capital. Like this year, I mean, my first one was Najee Harris. He was projected, for me, he was a first round back.
Sure.
Travis Etienne, first round back. And then Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, so on and so forth. There are a couple of guys that I totally whiffed on in terms of draft capital, and Tylan Wallace is one of them. I'm a huge Tylan Wallace fan. I think he's a really good player, but the injury red flags are much brighter than we originally thought.
Well, and I think they mattered more this year. The vibe I get from a lot of people in the space, a lot of analysts, a lot of people with way more inside information than me, is that red flags were going to matter more this year.
Right.
If you were injured, that was going to be a bigger negative. If you opted out, that was going to be a bigger negative. Like if there was any reason they couldn't get X amount of tape or data on you compared to this guy, they were going to take the other guy, with the exceptions being like guys who are just generational talents. Like Kyle Pitts was never falling, even if he had opted out. Jamar Chase did opt out. And as we saw, he was never really falling, and if anything, his prospects honestly rose, which is kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
So was there anyone who really impressed you this year when doing your profiles? I know you said that like Tylan Wallace, you felt like you kind of whiffed on just because he dropped so much, but was there someone where you did the profile on him and you were like, oh, wow, I should have been higher on this guy?
I think the one was probably Devontae Smith. I think in terms of being a pure NFL football player, I mean, he fits the mold of what the NFL is becoming at the receiver position in terms of intellect, how he moves, his fluidity, just his advanced conceptual understanding of the game of football is just so evident when you watch him play. And even watching him play last year, like I watched him play a ton. I'm like, this kid is really good. When I watched him play this year, I'm like, this kid has a chance to be potentially a special football player because of the advanced level conceptual and cognitive skill set that he has is really far above any player that I've seen coming out of college. And that means, that means a lot in terms of the game of football, how it is played now in comparison to how it was played like 15 years ago. Man, 15 years ago, Devontae Smith's not even a third round pick, in my opinion, because of how the game is played, very X receiver dominant game. Now, I mean, Devontae Smith's movement Z, who moves around all over the place, he's involved on all three levels of the field and makes plays everywhere. So for me, he was kind of the biggest one that I saw that I was like, okay, this kid is a lot better than I thought he was. And I could care less about his size.
I would say like Devonta Smith, good at football, big facts. Like it turns out maybe he won a Heisman for a reason. Real quick, last question, then we'll bring Bob on here. Was there anyone who really disappointed you? I know you were disappointed in what happened draft-wise with Wallace, but was there anyone who you watched and you went, oh man, I really thought this guy was going to be better?
Oh man, I think I'll go at two-pronged. The one guy I thought was going to get much better capital than he did was Tamarion Terry.
Okay, you were not the first person to say that. At this time last year, I mean, he was the Biletnikoff preseason watch list candidate, and he was projected to be a top 45 pick. Yeah, I was all in. On tape, I'm like, this guy is, he has the size, he has the raw athletic talent, he has the top end speed, the accelerative qualities, he's tough as nails.
special teams player too. He's a gunner.
And I feel like he'd have been definitely on the top of some
he'd
people's
be drafted. And that's the red flags, I think, were the injuries. Injuries were a big red flag for Terry, I think, too. There was character concerns apparently as well.
Yeah.
And then he didn't produce much at all this year because, he opted out post-injury, and then that all happened. But I would say the one I was surprised I didn't like a lot was Travis Etienne.
Interesting.
I thought I was going to like, because he was a mega producer, right? He's one of the most productive running backs you could say of the past decade.
There's a reason he was picked at 25. Well, the real reason was because Kadarius Toney wasn't available.
That's actually true.
There were other reasons,
according to Urban Meyer. Yeah. But he's one of those prospects. Like when I watched him on film, I'm like, that's it. And that's kind of how I felt about him, because there wasn't much else besides the elite level accelerative qualities. And those can take you a long way in the right offense. But there's a lot of gaps that he has to kind of fill in his game from a cognitive perspective. I don't think he's a good decision maker in comparison to some of his peers. I don't think he's a clean pass catcher. I think he's getting better. He reminds me a lot of Miles Sanders.
That's kind of comps and better comps to have all at the same time.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I like Etienne. I think he can be. I have him on AGS as a Pro Bowl caliber back, but I just have a ton of questions on how he's going to fill those gaps in his game, because they're all predicated off his ability to accelerate. Like in terms of him, making things happen behind the line of scrimmage, you don't see that very often from him. He has a very limited lateral toolbox. And like I said, he's a good pass catcher because he's a really good after the catch guy. Not much in terms of, a route tree at the running back position, in terms of like Najee Harris runs a full route tree for the running back position. You can split in the slot too. You can put him out wide like Alabama did in Sarkisian's offense, and he can kind of make plays there too. But it's kind of one of those interesting things is he going to struggle in some areas? I think he may. But he's also one of those backs where it's, him having James Robinson might be a good thing for his career. I think he needs and in terms of like real football, I think he's a back that needs a committee mate. And I think James Robinson's a really good NFL player. I don't think he's not as talented as Travis Etienne is. And I think Etienne's ceiling is the moon, but it's just being able to, develop as a holistic football player and develop a more broader skill set as a running back. I think that's the toughest thing, is because analytically, man, he knocks it out of the park. He's the highest scored analytic back that I've had, and it was him and Jonathan Taylor were the two highest in the past 3 years.
Good company.
Yeah, right? So there's a lot there. There's a lot to like, but he's just one of those players where analytically he's just absolute superstar. But on film, man, he very much is reminiscent of Miles Sanders in a sense where I want to love this dude. But there's a lot missing. And that's a good and a bad thing. Because if he fills those gaps, to me, man, he can be one of the best running backs in the NFL.
Yeah.
But it is if he fills those gaps, and we've seen with Miles Sanders too,
he struggled a little.
Miles Sanders hasn't really filled them.
Yeah.
The decision making considered is still there. The cognitive, the clock at the second level hasn't really advanced much. He's gotten worse as a receiver, like in terms of drops, and the fumble rate's still higher. So the question marks are still there for Sanders, and how much opportunity is Miles Sanders going to get to be a 70+% touch guy in Philadelphia anymore with Gainwell coming in, with Kerryon Johnson and Jordan Howard? It's a little more crowded than it was last year. But with Etienne, I'm looking forward to watching him play, man. I think he can definitely flourish. But the question is when and how patient are we going to be?
Well, let's see how patient our next guest is going to be. The one, the only, Bob Harris. How's it going, Bob?
It's going fantastic. How's it going, guys?
Great.
You're getting schooled up by Angelo. What could be better?
It's like, let's talk about some rookies. Well, who would be really good to talk about some rookies? Oh, Angelo, the guy who literally breaks down rookies as like the thing he does. So, but I'm curious as to your thoughts, Bob. How are you feeling about Travis Etienne and that landing spot in Jacksonville?
Without getting into all the grinding in the film, because guys like Angelo do this fantastic. I'm looking for landing spots. So I'm looking for clear paths to workload. He does not have that, but I do think he'll see enough, see the kind of usage we want. I think they'll still rely on James Robinson, but it just kind of moves them both down the rankings a little further than I'd like to see him. I mean, you look at the guy that Angelo talked about, Najee Harris, a better receiver, I think, than people give him credit for. I think the Steelers will use him more in that role. But, I mean, you look at the landing spot, and, I mean, I just can't think of anything but Mike Tomlin going back to Fast Willie Parker days saying, I'm going to run the wheels off him. That's what he's going to do. He's going to run the wheels off this guy. Hopefully the offensive line will be sufficient. Matt Canada coming in as a new offensive coordinator might help out a little bit. I think they'll use more misdirection and things that'll work in his favor. So I'm pretty optimistic for Najee Harris, willing to overpay for that, not willing to overpay for Travis Etienne.
I would agree on that. I did a mock recently where I took Najee in the second round, and I felt good about it.
Yeah, me too.
I've got the 102 in a dynasty league that I'm in where I did full trust the process mode. I've just got a ton of rookies, a ton of sophomores. Basically, I was like, if this person is over 27, I'm not drafting them. And I had the second worst record in the league, but now I've got the 102. I've built some quality guys, some guys like Cam Akers, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, all hit fairly well. Brandon Ayuk, Laviska Shenault. And so now it's like the guy who's got the 101 in my league, he's like, oh, Jamar Chase is generational. I don't see how I can pass on him. And I'm just like, if you let me take Najee Harris, I swear to God, I will be so happy, because you want to talk about generational. Najee Harris is one of the best running back prospects I've seen in a long time.
Right. And like if you're drafting in redrafts, already in best balls, I just sit there and I'm looking and comparing him to, again, looking for the clear path to workload. I mean, it kind of, if you're in most of these drafts, if you see 17 running backs come off the first two rounds, one of them is going to be Najee Harris, and one of them should be, because once you get past that 15 or so, you're talking about guys without that clear path to workload. That bothers me.
Yeah,
that early.
Totally get that. All right, well, Bob, it's amazing to have you here. Of course, Bob, former Fantasy Sports Writers Association Writer of the Year, a Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer, senior editor at Fantasy Football Diehards, which is at FF Diehards if you want to go find him on Twitter, and one of the hosts of the SiriusXM Fantasy Show. Dude, it is such an honor to have you on. And I just got to ask, with someone with your experience, someone who definitely had a different start to all of this than I think a lot of us here, how did you get started in playing fantasy sports?
Well, first of all, kind of you to have me on, and been enjoying the conversation today, Angelo.
Thanks, man.
Very smart. Love that stuff. Honestly, it's something he said is right about staying in your lanes. And so my lane has been playing fantasy football for, I think I started in 1986. A friend of mine, I lived in Tucson. A friend of mine came back from San Diego, and to our small group of friends, he walked in the door and said, I've got something you guys are going to love. He was not wrong. We loved it. We started playing fantasy football, and about a week into playing fantasy football, I realized we don't have enough information to really play this right. And so that kind of was something that was stuck in the back of my mind. I was a little bit of a graphic designer back in the day. So I started making a little newsletter that turned into, soon it was a 20-page newsletter for our league. And the next thing you know, I'm thinking, man, I should try, I think I'm probably not alone in wishing I had more information. And so that was kind of, the direction I started going in, was how can I provide people who play, because the one thing we know, once you play, you love this game, right? You love
absolutely,
and you want to play better. And so I went to great lengths to help people play better, probably much to my detriment early on. Never good at making money, but great at creating content. And that still holds true. I'm great at making content, lousy at making money.
No, I totally get that. I mean, like my personal journey, like I went from being a guy who was like, I'm going to look at the projections on draft day to being like, okay, I'm going to maybe listen to some stuff like the month leading up. But like, if I really like do anything before that, am I working hard or am I working smart? Because like how much stuff is really going to be solidified to now I'm like reading through Thor Nystrom's UDFA article, like front to back. And I'm like, how was I not doing this before?
Right.
Like,
and I think that's
even for redraft.
I do think that's something that we have in common, fantasy players. They're the people who sit on the toilet reading the back of the shampoo bottle, right? I mean, you always want to be consuming information. And so, that was one of my goals early on, was I know these people are dying for information. I want to give it to them. And when I started, the scoring was all done USA Today, Monday morning was how you scored your games, right? With a pencil and a paper and a USA Today. And I mean, I tried to take advantage and leverage those things. I created a 900 number where people could call on Sunday night and start listening and paying me to listen by the minute to box scores. I just sat there and read box scores, but honestly, you could tell how people were into it. Like, so I started calling teams and saying, hey, there were people calling, asking you for this kind of information. God, yes. And, they were getting the people calling, the media relations department looking for information on injuries and trying to gain that little bit of an edge. So this is not a new thing, this desire for information. It's been something there, and it's kind of something I've, relied on the last 30 years to keep me in cornflakes and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned injuries. I think injury analysis is a big area of growth for the industry. Like, if you look at the right people on fantasy Twitter, like they are, even the fantasy industry as a whole, but like they'll tell you, like, find a good fantasy doctor on Twitter.
Right.
See what they say about injuries. It will definitely give you a leg up on some of these guys. What changes since you got started have you enjoyed, and like where do you still see some room for growth?
So look, I think in the way we play the games, I mean, you look at when daily fantasy came along, that was a big milestone. I keep waiting for the time when we're making in-game substitutions. I mean, I don't see why that's not coming. The GPS tracking of the players allows you to do a lot of things. I mean, that's how the players are paid. Your bonuses are figured out for snap count. I mean, everything can be figured out. And one of the things I think, that was interesting about last season was how much the world learned about COVID from the tracking and the data the NFL compiled, because everyone's being tracked. We knew where everyone was. We knew their orientation to each other. We know all this information. So you look at the next gen stats, things like that, that come from this data. I think the next step is to be able to be an actual coach, make in-game substitutions, pull guys in, pull guys out, do things like that. Would love to see some of that technology coming.
Yeah, that's an in-game substitution in fantasy. That
right, pull a guy that's sucking, or I mean, what do you do when someone gets hurt now? I mean, I want to replace him, put somebody else in.
Man, you maybe shouldn't have mentioned that one. You might be onto something there.
Yeah.
That's like potential $1 million idea in the works. You got to talk to some coders, some app designers, someone, like, figure something out there, because I have not even heard that suggested before. That is truly intriguing. And something else that was intriguing that I read in my research for this was the Bill Winkenbach article that you did.
Wink.
Yeah. So what was the favorite thing you learned while writing that article? And for those who don't know, Bill Winkenbach is one of the guys credited with the start of fantasy football, if not fantasy sports in general.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he was doing something that's basically rotisserie baseball a couple of years before he was doing the football. The football, they started in 1962. They were sitting around. They were bored. All the guys that started this were associated in some way with the Oakland Raiders, whether they worked for the team itself or covered the team. They called it the GOPL, the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League. And there were some interesting guys in it. And I think the great part was talking to some of those guys after the fact. Andy Muslimas, had a really famous bar in the Oakland area, the King's X, and he was one of the original members. Bob Bloom, who was a Raiders play-by-play announcer, got sat down for a couple hours with him and just talk about what the things they did and how they played. And just, I think the whole takeaway from this project, the thing that I loved about it, and I had all their original documentation, their typed out rules, their handwritten drafts, the original fantasy drafts, all these things, and was how little, I guess it would be the way to put it, how little things changed. Like, I started playing in 1986. These guys started playing in 1962. We're playing now in 2021. We are the same people. The people have not changed. The mindset has not changed. The issues and problems they had, the things they wanted to do, the way they thought, it's all the same. I mean, it's just, and I kept thinking as I wrote that article, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Everyone is kind of trying to get to the same spot, and we're still trying to get to that spot. But these guys were great innovators and thinking ahead, and there were some really fascinating guys involved. One of them being Ron Wolf, who, at the time had just signed on as a scout for the Raiders after being a water boy for the Colts, and he went on to have a pretty good career as a GM in Green Bay, and so just some interesting stories and tales, and just drafting a guy who had died over the offseason, things like that remind you how important the information is, and just it was a great time, great talking to them, and just great learning about it, right? I mean, we all had kind of these notions of how it kind of the fantasy sports and rotisserie sports came about. And I think it was great to get back to the root of it. And Bill Winklebaugh was pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned some stuff from reading that article, some stuff that I certainly didn't know. And you mentioned this, but like the game has changed so much and yet so many things remain the same. Is there anything specific that you took away from your research and your writing of that article that it's like, this is still relevant today as much as it was then?
Smack talk. I mean, that's the right, like that's the essence. That's that was the thing. They were totally into that, and I'm still totally into that. Everyone I know is into that. Hell, I have a career based on that for the most part. So yeah, I think that was the thing. How much we're all very much the same, and you get involved in this game, this hobby that we have. And I mean, we take it way more seriously than we should. We put way more time into it than we should. And I love every minute of it. And I have no regrets about any of it. I mean, I've spent the better part of 30 years or, more. So, I mean, it's just, it's been a big part of my life. And honestly, I mean, I was doing this, when I started making it a business in 1993, and for years I was making no money at this. I was just, it was costing me money. Hell, if I do this another 20 years, I might break even. I don't care. I'm doing this. This is like, I think you see that theme as a predominant theme among people, both playing and doing this. I mean, look, we all want to make a living, get by, and do all those things that I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but not much.
No, I totally agree. For me, it's like, I just want to beat my friends. If I win some money, cool. But like, I won a work league 2 years ago, and it was great being able to like lord that over literally two of my bosses. Of course, they did not love it when I then subsequently got the first pick in our draft somehow the following year on top of the championship win. But it was okay because I then proceeded not to defend my title. But I digress. So one of the other things in my research that I caught was your desire to catch the waiver wire a week in advance. And I thought this was incredibly interesting because it was something that I personally picked up on reading David Gonos's future waiver wire pieces that he does for The Athletic. I got an Athletic subscription this past year, and I saw those articles come up, and I'm like, this is crazy. This guy is like trying to make his bets on like, no. This is week 10. You need to be picking up guys for week 12 because in week 11, there's going to be someone that snipes you on that guy. And like in week 12, you're trusting your waiver priority or you're trusting your fab. So what is your strategy for getting those picks right, landing on those guys a week or two in advance?
Being very hopeful. Right. So, I mean, you've been doing this a while. So, a lot of this is way simple, like Angelo is there playing chess. I'm here playing checkers a lot of times, but there's room for both of these things, right? Like, so Marcus Grant, my friend at NFL Network, loves this when I say this, but the key to fantasy success as you go into the season is, number one, not drafting last year's best team, right? And that sounds like incredibly stupidly simple because it is, but it's also really important. And it's also important to be thinking ahead. I'm in like, I play close to 30 leagues every year, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to prioritize, where I focus my waiver attention because I also have a job. And creating content and doing all these things, it's really time intensive, labor intensive, and you're putting a lot of effort into it. So you're not able to, and I often make excuses like, my job is not winning fantasy titles. It's helping other people win fantasy titles. Well, damn it, I still want to win. So if I want to do that, I have to play a little ahead on the waiver wire because I'm not going to be the first guy in line. I'm not going to be there on Tuesday morning at 0600, or whatever time things start. So I'm trying to play a week or two ahead. So you're just looking at the way the games are developing, the teams are developing, schemes are developing. You're looking for talent that maybe, and sometimes you're planting flags on guys that, you're going to have some misses, but it's worth it to put that effort in. So most of it is like knowing coaches, knowing their histories, their tendencies, understanding what the scheme is, who fits the scheme, who's getting an opportunity, what they did with an opportunity. A lot of it's intuitive, right? Like a lot of what we do is. And so you're playing your best hunches, but I think it's critical. So you're looking at bye weeks ahead of time, right? Mm-hmm. So when your players are going to be off, you're looking at injuries And, as soon as I see someone hurt in a game, I'm like looking to get in a waiver claim and get everything set up to, for the next guy. But I mean, that's what it is, playing ahead. And I don't know if there's an exact science to it, because there's not a lot of exact science to any of this, but a lot of it is intuitive, and you just get used to what, so since I've started doing this, one of the things that I think is the key thing to watch is the coaches. You're talking about a league where every week everything changes, right? The game plan changes, the opponent changes, the scheme adjusts, and all these things are adjusted to that. You're traveling some weeks, you're not traveling. A coach wants to keep everything as consistent as possible, right? And so coaches go about that in various ways, or they handle that, or they manage that in various ways. Understanding how they handle and manage it, getting a good handle and a good understanding of that can help you go a long way, and not just succeeding in, predicting maybe when free agents are going to come out, but also in, understanding how, maybe game scripts are going to play out a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice, and certainly covered. My next question was, are there any other strategies that you think give you an edge in how you play? But like checking on coaches, definitely a big one. Following game scripts, definitely a big one. I think this all totally makes sense. All right, well, you guys want to get into some rookie talk? Maybe do a little group work. So, Angelo, as the film guy, I'm going to start with you here. What rookies have stood out to you as you've done more and more research since the draft?
Man, I think Elijah Moore is definitely one of those. I think he's going to have I think he might end up being the wide receiver one in that offense come year's end. I think he's a really good fit for what they're doing in that Shanahan type system. I think they need a player like him who can play multiple roles in an offense. Because right now, I mean, it's wide open. There's not a guy in that offense. I don't think Corey Davis is that guy. But I'm a big fan of Elijah Moore, and I think he's one of them. I think at the running back position, it's got to be Trey Sermon. I mean, we're looking at a guy
as a Niners fan.
In 2022, there's not much competition whatsoever. So everyone,
but Elijah Mitchell is gone.
Exactly. Everyone. So he has a good chance of seeing 75% touch share in a very run friendly scheme. So I'm really excited for those two guys in particular.
You stole my Elijah Moore. That I love the Jets. So I'll just pivot a little bit and go with Michael Carter there as well.
To confirm, the running back, not the safety.
Yeah,
right?
The running back, not the safety. And so you guy coming off a couple 1,000-yard seasons, like splitting with Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
But I think he and Elijah Moore both kind of bring about the thing. We could look at what they did on the offensive line and what they've done on the offensive line, right? With Elijah Vera Tucker coming in, so that's great news. Moving in next to Mekhi Becton. But you look at the pieces there: Kevin Coleman, LaMichael Pirine, and
Josh Adams.
Josh Adams. I mean, the rest of it is not. None of it is very inspiring, right? I mean, Kevin Coleman was pretty inspiring in 2016, less so now.
Would you believe me, by the way, if I told you that Josh Adams was the highest paid running back on the Jets?
I would.
That's absolutely insane.
But if you look at Carter, here's a guy that had like 23 plays of 20 yards plus last season. I mean, he's an explosive threat. So I like that. I like the Trey Sermon pick as well. By the way, my good friend who I pay a lot of attention to, Matt Waldman at the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, has him as his number one back. Also, I don't watch a lot of film. And number one, I mean, and Matt has, an interesting track record with some of these. Had Nick Chubb ranked ahead of Saquon Barkley coming out that year as well. And so,
I'm not sure he's wrong on that one.
I'm not sure either. So
I'll let that be my hot take.
Right. Just I think he's always got his own look at things. So, but Trey Sermon, the thing that caught me about that was I don't watch a lot of college football because I work on the NFL, right? So I'm paying attention to the NFL. But I caught a couple of Ohio State games. Every time I look at that game, I mean, aside from looking at Justin Fields, I'm going, who is this guy? Maybe it was just two really good games, but he just looked like he had all the pieces. That he's kind of, I think, scheme independent. I think he can play in a variety of schemes, and I think he landed in a good scheme, obviously. So I'm with you guys on that one. And if I'm trying to come up with a wide receiver, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, I think he might be the best receiver on the Lions right now. But more importantly, he's a kneecap biter. And according to Dan Campbell, that is something you must be to excel on this line.
I got to tell you, that Lions team, if everything goes right, is going to be fun at a certain point. Not necessarily in 2021, because remember, Jared Goff's still the quarterback. Jared Goff and fun, I'm not sure if those are things that are ever going to quite go together, but you got DeAndre Swift. You got the coach who is an absolute nutcase in the best possible way. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god, who is honestly like one of my favorite landing spots for a wide receiver in this draft, him going to Detroit, where there is no reason he can't be the wide receiver 1 on that team.
Right.
Like none at all. Hawkinson, like there's talent there. It's going to be a rough year at least for them. But if we come back in like 2-3 years and like Detroit's one of the funner teams to watch in the NFL, it won't shock me at all.
Best post-game press conferences. Also, I mean, don't overlook the impact Anthony Lynn's going to have there. Very successful offensive coordinator, running backs coach. I mean, you go back over the course of his history as an assistant, whether it's position coach, offensive coordinator, running backs tend to excel under him. So exciting there for DeAndre Swift. Deuce Staley also there as assistant head coach. So I like a lot of those things. I wanted to ask Angelo about a guy, though, Terrace Marshall, who I think is a good landing spot as well. I'm looking at last year's finishes. There were 3 Carolina receivers finished in the top 36, right? So all viable starters. I think Sam Darnold could be an upgraded quarterback. I don't know that he will. And if he's not, David Tepper will fix that at some point, because according to David Tepper, he's not here to be 8-8. And I don't think he is, right? You can make all that money and then spend it all to be, to be regular, right? So I just think the guy had a good landing spot there, and maybe someone that's worth keeping an eye on. Angelo, do you agree?
I 100% agree. I have Terrace Marshall on AGS by wide receiver 4. I mean, he's one of those guys where I'm trying to get him everywhere at value. I mean, he's fallen the mid-second round in some rookie drafts. I mean, if you're in a startup draft, you're going to be able to get him a lot later than you would have about a month ago. So
I hope you're right about
the talent is there. The talent is there. I mean, the only thing you kind of worry about is the medicals. But where you're drafting him, are you really worried about any of that? Like, it's not like you're spending a first-round rookie pick on him anymore. And if you're in a startup draft, I mean, where are you drafting him? Like, you know what I mean? You're drafting him probably past the 10th round. So it's like you're not really, you're banking on the upside. And I think the guy's a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver. And I think he has a lot of really unique traits that fits well in that offense. They need a secondary target because DJ Moore is one of the budding stars in the NFL, I believe. But I think Marshall is going to be a fantastic NFL wide receiver, and I'm trying to get every share of him possible, especially where he's sitting right now, ADP wise.
Yeah, I love that. I like Marshall a lot. He's a guy whose versatility I really like because he is physically more of a perimeter guy, but he's got that experience in the slot from his like college performances, and I think that Brady and Rule will not hesitate to move him around.
Yeah, I agree.
That opens him up to a lot of opportunity. If he is just like, not that they'll be like for like, but if he just goes into where Curtis Samuel left off, like it's not going to shock me.
Yeah, in terms of production, I think. I mean, I think he can be, the second receiver in that offense. I think Robbie Anderson is a nice tertiary piece in any NFL offense, but I don't think he has the talent that Terrace Marshall possesses.
Wait a minute now. I'll brook no Robbie Anderson slander, sir.
So here's the one thing I would warn you about on Robbie Anderson. The guy that Matt Rule is going to defend before anyone on that roster is Robbie Anderson.
I know, Temple guy. I know.
As a little bit of a connection.
As a Temple guy myself, I stand for both of them. I was from the Al Golden years personally, but I think everyone's kind of leaping to this conclusion that Robbie Anderson might be gone after this year because they got Terrace Marshall, and it's like, why not both?
I'm more worried about Joe Brady being gone than anybody else being gone after a year. But
that head coach job, I think, well is not far.
I think I think Brady's an NFL head coach at this time next year.
Yeah, wouldn't shock me at all.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of some shocks, though, was there anyone you soured on the more you looked into him? And Bob, I'll start with you, and then I'll let Angelo finish up with all the research he's done.
I mean, whatever salary I have is landing spots. So everybody who is a wide receiver drafted by the Baltimore Ravens took 3 steps back.
Don't do it for Tylen Wallace now. Come on. Now.
Right. I mean,
Brutal.
look, maybe they're about to have a great metanoia and to make this total sea change. Greg Roman's history says probably not, and the talent. I mean, look, might they not be the team with the fewest routes run? Maybe. Might they be not the last in receiving yards? Maybe. But they're not going to be that much better. So I'm sorry, Rashad Bateman. I don't like the landing spots for either of those guys. And in the running back, I would have loved to seen Javonte Williams go somewhere with an immediate clear path to workload. Sure. I do think a year from now,
yes,
you're going to be very happy. I'm investing in him. I'm in every dynasty I can. But realizing it's going to take probably a year, but I think beyond that, and look, it's not entirely certain that Melvin Gordon sticks around this year, right? If things are going, in a good direction for Williams, that would be great if it happens. So, but thinking that a team like Denver that doesn't have a great quarterback, that hasn't a coach like Vic Fangio, who
have a great quarterback yet,
right? An old defensive coordinator though as the head coach. Sure. Who's going to want to run the ball and play defense to the degree he possibly can. I think that'd be great. And, of course, Aaron Rodgers would change all this. But as we all know, Aaron Rodgers is going nowhere.
Oh, that's interesting that you say that. Why are you so positive that Rodgers isn't going anywhere?
Emotions are funny things. Number one, owing $30 million if you leave. He has it. But, I mean, even if you have it, it's a lot of money, right? Just to walk away from. I think they'll get things on the same page. It's funny, depending on who you listen to. I know Devontae Adams seems like not as optimistic as other people, but people I think that talk to Rodgers a lot, his friends, former teammates, I think they're basically speaking for him because otherwise they wouldn't be speaking at all, right? So when you hear John Kuhn and you hear James Jones sitting there on my NFL Network telling me all these things that, well, I don't know. Well, yes, he does. He does know this for sure because he's been told, he's talking to Aaron Rodgers, so he knows. So I'm just expecting things to cool down. I think the Packers, this is a team that maybe if they did have a traditional owner, this would already be cleared up. A guy who could come in and say, hey, Gutekunst, get out of here, or whatever. I mean, whatever it takes. I think they'll get this figured out. Minor concerns in the back of my mind are David Dunn, who has worked the system before for Carson Palmer to get him out of Cincinnati and moved on. So, I mean, there's things to look at in the other direction. But honestly, I think, if I'm sitting here, I'm 90-10 that Aaron Rodgers is Green Bay Packer week 1 next year under the starting quarterback for that team.
Well, Packers fans surely hope that you are correct. I am less optimistic myself, especially because they don't have that traditional owner that can go there and stop the ship from sinking. Angelo, real quick, first your thoughts on Rodgers. Where is he going to be playing? And then who's a guy you soured on a bit post-draft?
So I'm a big Bears fan. So I would love to see him out of Green Bay and out of the NFC North. But I think, like Bob said, man, I think he's a Packer at the end of the day. I think he's thrown to Devontae Adams, and he's going to be the captain of that ship for the foreseeable future.
Totally fair.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change. The Broncos are a destination I would watch, but I doubt that. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean,
his girl lives in Boulder. I think that's what's working in their favor.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I don't think he's going to change much. And your second question was someone I soured on post draft. I guess there's one of the only first rounders that Kadarius Toney is someone I just never really. I don't think from a fantasy football perspective, he's going to be a consistent producer. I think when you talk about analytically, man, red flags galore. But when you look at what his role will be, he'll kind of play the Joker role in the NFL offense. He's going to play kind of that Tariq Cohen type of an NFL offense, which is okay.
What you want from your wide receiver.
Yeah. So it's really interesting of what he'll do. I think he can develop into an NFL slot receiver. He has extremely interesting movement capabilities, but I don't know how he translates into the current NFL climate in terms of being a productive fantasy wide receiver. So I don't think it's going to happen. So he was one I never really liked him to begin with. I'm pretty low on AGS, but I like his qualities, but I just don't see how he can be a consistently productive NFL wide receiver, especially because, Daniel Jones throwing the football too. Kenny Galladay's there. It's just not a great environment and ecosystem for, I think, multiple fantasy producers, especially when you have a lot of mouths to feed there.
I would agree. And actually, I'm going to kind of transition into this question here because you bringing up Tony, you bringing up the mouths to feed. And Bob, I want to get your input on this too. We'll start with Angelo, though. Does this end Darius Slayton's fantasy relevance, this draft pick that just happened?
Yes. I think the biggest thing that ends his fantasy relevance, though, is how the Giants were set at Devontae Smith at 11. That tells you everything you need to know about what they think of Slayton. I think they were so set on Devontae Smith at 11 that they play the same role. They're the Z of an offense. Galladay's an X. They'll rotate their slot receivers. I do not see how it's not, the writing's on the wall for him in terms of producing. They brought in John Ross too. That's another one. That's an interesting ad.
It's an interesting one.
I don't think he'll be fantasy viable, but he will probably impact Slayton's target share. Yeah. Also his snap count. So that's an interesting one. I just don't see Slayton as fantasy viable in New York. Bless you. I don't think Daniel Jones can support Barkley, Ingram, Galladay, and
Shepard.
Rudolph. Yeah, you know what I mean. So the mouths, it's getting thin there. So
I would agree.
I don't know, man. I like Slayton as a player. I really do, but I think the writing was definitely on the wall when Gettleman was basically pounding the table for Devontae Smith at 11, and the Eagles kind of swooped in and took him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bob, your thoughts?
The good news here is they have a great innovative offensive mind. And oh wait, no, they don't. Damn,
they do not.
So right. I mean, look, I was kind of, I might not have been the engineer of the hype train for Daniel Jones last year, but I was the conductor. I was taking tickets and handing them out. And so often as fantasy managers, we're a year ahead, right? So I don't necessarily think that, he's going to be great guns and make that kind of leap up into, fantasy starter relevance. But man, you look at what he did last year. He's fairly mobile, more mobile. Can't run all the way to the end zone, but he can run. There were 6 games where he led the team in rushing, right? They've surrounded him with weapons. Look, the onus is on him this year to do something. I think he will do something, whether that's, enough to make him fantasy relevant, maybe enough to make some of the top higher end weapons there fantasy relevant as well. I mean, Kenny Galladay, they're paying. He's going to get his. And so, but I think beyond that, you're probably taking your chances. Barkley, Galladay, and then you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit. And I think, guys like Slayton are going to be afterthoughts.
Yep, it makes a ton of sense. All right. What I want to do now is, Bob, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Angelo. What are your top 3 rookie sleepers? This can be for redraft or dynasty, though if you pick all dynasty, I am going to ask you for at least one redraft sleeper.
I want to say Des Fitzgerald just because of the landing spot. Just look, is he better than Josh? You tell me, Angelo. Is he better than Josh Reynolds?
If he has more potential, I think the talent's there. It's just it's in that offense. It's so tough because Corey Davis I liked Corey Davis as a receiver, like him, I should say. I don't know in terms of.
There's a lot of targets there. I think that's
right? That's the thing is like AJ Brown's not going to get 200 targets, so it's like someone else has to jump in. But
I mean, with that talent though,
it might be if he develops, I think he can be a good secondary option in that offense. I think he's a really nice sleeper.
Yeah, I think that's the thing too, and I think the other guy that I'm kind of watching that I think has like a future. Maybe it's not a this year thing, but Josh Palmer. For the Chargers. You wonder how long we're going to see Mike Williams there. I don't know, maybe another year. And then beyond that, there's a handful of guys there that have kind of flashed at moments, but playing with Justin Herbert and a thoroughly revamped offensive line that is just locked and loaded to keep Herbert in good shape. I think he might be a good play there. And I guess, I want to go. I want to say Davis Mills. I mean, just opportunity.
I think that
matters.
Counts.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be one there as well. And look, if he was the starter sometime this season, I wouldn't be totally shocked. If he's the week 1 starter next year, I will be totally unsurprised.
Interesting. So you don't think that Houston, let's say they're awful this year, which wouldn't surprise anyone. They don't draft QB because they now have Davis Mills.
We'll find out. I mean, honestly,
sure. I know it's really far out. I'm
right.
Like,
I don't know what exactly is their draft capital last year. I mean, what kind of?
I think this next year they finally have their picks back.
They're in better shape, but honestly, they're going to have so many holes that I just wonder if just landing Mills now. I mean, look, we heard talk. I mean, plenty of people mocked him going in the first round. Some to the Patriots. I know Peter Schrager, or not Patriots, the Buccaneers, Patriots Junior. The Buccaneers had him going at 32 and maybe sit around and learn Tom Brady. So I think that there are people within the league who view him as that kind of guy who maybe just not a lot to hang his hat on because of the injuries in college, but all the rest of the pieces are there.
Okay, well, we didn't really get a running back from you, so I want a redraft running back sleeper from you, Bob.
Well, because the Gordian knot of backfields is always hard to untie.
Sure.
You never know what's going to happen. I'm going to go with the Patriots and Ramondre Stevenson. I think he catches the ball. I think he's better than he gets credit for, right? I mean, he's more well-rounded. And it's just that in that offense, who knows what's going to happen? I don't know that Sony Michel's going to stick around. He doesn't play special teams. So I think that helps Stevenson out a little bit there. James White's always going to be there. But we'll see what happens with Damian Harris. I think he's going to be the lead guy. But it would not take much attrition to get Stevenson in the lock and load role. So he would be my off-the-chart sleeper at running back.
Bob, I got to agree with RF Fantasy here. I love it. You're not even the first expert I have interviewed today that has said how much they love Ramondre Stevenson. And I think that says a lot. That is a name that people need to be circling on the board, as it were, because Bob says it. I talked to Thor earlier. Thor says it. Angelo, are you going to make it 3 experts out of 3 here, loving some Ramondre Stevenson?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is what's going to go on in that backfield right there. I mean, Sony Michel is kind of soured. I think he's on the way out of, New England. Damian Harris. He's a good player, but has he ever really fully taken the reins of that backfield in 2 years? And the answer is no. Ramondre Stevenson has a really good opportunity in front of him. He's a really interesting prospect in what he does at his size. But yeah, that's a team in terms of, we're talking about really good rushing ecosystems. That's a tier 1 rushing ecosystem in the NFL. The New England Patriots want to run the ball a lot. They brought in 2 tight ends. They virtually don't have anybody of value outside at receiver, unless you're talking about Nelson Aguilar. They want to run the ball a lot. And I think Ramondre Stevenson is a really interesting one. My 3 are going to start with, we talked about this pre-show, is Javian Hawkins. For me, man, I think for me, I liked him a ton. I'm pretty high in AGS as a prospect that has a really high ceiling, pretty low floor. But man, he's a kid that reminds me a lot of Phillip Lindsay. He's a really good accelerator, really good at top end speed, tougher than he looks in terms of stature and size. His pass catching capabilities are kind of a question mark, but Mike Davis is how long is he going to hold on to that job? And is there
Mike Davis is a very good Justa guy. He is a slight step above. He deserves ever so slight respect on his name.
He does.
But that's about it.
He does. But the thing is, is Mike Davis going to carry 80% of that touch? No.
He's going to carry 80% of those games.
60.
What I'm questioning.
The thing is, there's a lot of touches to go around in that backfield.
Almost all of them.
Exactly. So it's there's a ton of stuff. There's a ton of touches to go around. There's a lot of receptions, a lot of rushes. So I think Hawkins could play his way into some significant playing time. And if he does, if he takes the reins of that backfield, the talent lines up with that. And then my second guy is an interesting guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but Amari Rodgers.
Interesting.
Because with the Aaron Rodgers news, people aren't talking about Amari Rodgers. People
True.
Aaron Rodgers, they're kind of considering, hey, Aaron Rodgers might be out of town. What if he's not? Amari Rodgers plays the Randall Cobb role. He's a good, tough football player. He reminds me a little bit of Golden Tate. Can work right around the line of scrimmage. He's a reliable pass catcher who can run. He can run routes down the field. He works mostly on the first and second level of the defense. He's what Aaron Rodgers wanted. Last year, he wanted them to trade up and take Justin Jefferson. He was like, okay, didn't do that. We had LaVisca Chenault on the board, passed on him for Jordan Love. We finally get
this close to getting my boy Brandon Ayuk, and luckily they didn't, because I love that man.
Yep, he's a beast. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of targets to go around that offense. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is to stay,
yes,
this is going to be Aaron Rodgers' football team and his offense. What he wants to do, it's going to be more pass heavy, I think, than we're used to, which is a good thing, and good for the NFL, I think, too.
Does that mean Jake Kumerow's coming back?
Oh my God. That story, that article, I was dying because I'm like, he loved Jake. Kumerow was supposed to be the second receiver in that offense. And when you watch Kumerow play, he had a clear connection with Rodgers.
Yeah.
And the kid played the brand of football that Rodgers liked. He was reliable, he's tough, physical football player who had really good hands. That's it. He was always in the right spots. So touchdown juice. I love that. The thing is, the fact that they literally couldn't, like, how do you not hang on to a guy like that? But
yeah, especially after letting him go the day after Aaron Rodgers.
The day after.
By the way, I apologize to Des Fitzpatrick for calling him Fitzgerald, but I think I was projecting good things for him, Larry style.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. I will say, Angelo, I don't know. This guy's a little bit deeper cuts, but I was talking to Thor Nystrom earlier about him. Bailey Gaither. He's an undrafted free agent that Green Bay picked up, and Amari Rodgers is a little bit more in the shorter range as far as his skill set. This is kind of the vibe that I'm getting, and Gaither is kind of a guy that can be the deep threat. So I'm wondering, any thoughts there? Is this a guy that had been on maybe your radar at all? Like, curious.
Heard the name, but I haven't dove into his tape a lot. Thor's a really smart dude, so anything Thor will say, I'm gonna trust him.
So I would recommend. I would love to actually see you do some.
I wanna take a look at. I've heard his name, but I think for me, is MVS the deep threat? No. Come on. There is going to be that third level threat.
You can't catch the ball half the time.
The third level threat in that offense is going to open up. I think someone's going to take that job. If it's Gaither, I don't know. It could be.
But you still like Rodgers regardless.
I do, regardless. I think he's going to be a steal this year if Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, which I think he will. My last guy, Jacob Harris, the Rams wide receiver / tight end they drafted. He was one of the most athletic players in the whole draft. Ran the best 3-cone, I think, at the receiver position, I believe, this year. He's a really interesting height, weight, size, speed guy. And I don't know how long Higbee has as being the primary pass-catching target at tight end in that offense. I think they're looking for more. I think they're looking to push the ball down the field this year, especially with the addition of Matthew Stafford. And I think Harris kind of helps them do that. And I think he's, especially in tight end premium, you might get this guy for free. So it's worth the flyer. He's a 4th round pick. Like, that's
a great one.
It's not like he's it's not a UDFA or a 7th rounder, but Jacob Harris was he was a 4th round pick. He was, I just looked 140
and they are
overall pick. So it's like
very noticeably missing a tight end right now.
Yeah.
Gerald Everett's
gone. Yeah. And so I think with the way I think they want to do things with that offense, and they want to push the ball down the field with Matthew Stafford, I think it makes sense to look at this guy because he has 4th round draft capital. This is not a 7th rounder. It's not a UDFA we're talking about. This is a guy that McVay said, I like this guy. Let's go get him in the 4th round. I didn't have
looking for Jordan Reed. Still looking for them.
Oh, stop.
Unfortunately, I think Jordan Reed is still looking for
Jordan Reed fan. Man, it just didn't work out. Just didn't work out that way. But yeah, I'm excited for Harris and what he can potentially do in a kind of a revamped Rams offense.
I love the pick a lot. That's definitely a deeper cut. Exactly what I'm looking for here. All right. We're going to do a new game now. It's rate the player talking 2021 redraft specifically, and we're talking PPR. Basically, tell me how you think this player will do in 2021, and then are they someone you're going to target in your redraft leagues? So the first one, a very contentious guy, Joe Mixon, running back for the Bengals, of course. Bob, what are your thoughts on Joe Mixon for 2021?
One of the last guys on that clear path to workload bandwagon that I like to ride on. I'll jump in. I like to talk right now. I mean, Joe Bernard's obviously gone. I'd like to see them use the receiving skills that he has, that they have kind of ignored up to this point. I think I'll be investing. Again, in the running back frenzy that is the first 2 rounds of every draft I've been in, he's probably going to have to go in that round, in that second round.
And you're comfortable with that ADP?
I'm not comfortable, but I'm buying.
Okay, that's a good enough answer on that one, I would say. Angelo, your thoughts on Mixon? You agreeing with Bob here?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, I'm trying to get Mixon everywhere I can, especially in redraft, because it's a big value guy. I mean, he's gonna be someone who's what's he gonna get 80% of the touch share or more.
The coach literally said we want him on the field for all 3 downs.
All 3 downs, and it's in an ascending offense too. This offense is only going to get better with the weapons that are around Joe Burrow. The offensive line is going to be a year more mature, and they're going to get some pieces back. I'm all in on Joe Mixon. I think, we're talking about a guy who could be a top 5 running back this year. I mean, that's the ceiling for Mixon. I mean, if he's RB3, or is any of us really shocked RB4? Dave Montgomery was RB4 last year. Remember that?
I'll admit I'm still a little shocked by that.
And that's
especially after his first year.
I think everybody is, but I think Mixon's in for a really good season if he can stay healthy. But opportunities up. The offense is ascending. I mean, we're looking at a guy who's has a really, really big season ahead of him if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I had a tweet, I think, like about a month ago at this point. It's like, here's your flow chart for drafting Joe Mixon. Do you believe he will be healthy? Yes, then you should probably draft him. No, well, then you probably shouldn't. That's about as deep as it gets for me. It's just like everything is there. If you don't think he'll go down again with an injury, then there's no reason to pass on him, unless you got like a top 5 pick and you can get someone like Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey, someone like that, where it's like, yes, we get it. You should be taking this person ahead of Joe Mixon. Sure. Someone that is going to go a little bit later in drafts, though, Curtis Samuel. Angelo, going to start with you. What are your thoughts on Curtis Samuel for 2021? New offense, old coach though, and a new quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I like Curtis Samuel, man. I don't know how everybody else kind of feels about him, but for me, I think, depending on where you can draft him, but I mean, if he's my wide receiver 4, receiver 3 in some cases, I wouldn't be mad about that, because he also, he's going to get deep targets too. He's going to operate on the line of scrimmage, but that offense is going to throw with Fitzpatrick at the helm, I believe. So, I think he's an interesting player, because he had a good amount of success in Carolina last year too. There were spurts when he was averaging, like 14, 15 points a game. Like he played really well in stretches. So I think we can see that a little more consistently in Washington. But, he's a tough one to peg, because obviously McLaurin's going to eat up a big portion of that offense.
Sure.
Diami Brown isn't a slouch either. Logan Thomas is there. But if Samuel's second in targets on that team, are we shocked?
No.
And I think that's I think they're going to throw a little more than they did last year, because they can. Last year, they really what are you going to do? Taylor Hinkie and, Alex Smith.
They have a starter, fine.
Dwayne Haskins. Yeah, they have a capable starter back there. I think he opens up that whole offense for Gibson and company too.
Bob, what about you? You in on Curtis Samuel?
Curtis Samuel's the player, not as in on Scott Turner as the play caller, who didn't make great use of him in Carolina when he had an opportunity to make good use of him.
Yep.
Claims he's seen the light thanks to Joe Brady. So maybe he has. And look, I find where he's going, his current price tag, I've seen him going anywhere from, like round 7 to round 10. I'm fine with pretty much anywhere in that range. I don't think it's crazy. The later I get them, the better. I'm usually looking for the cheaper components when I'm looking, and I'm not like, if I miss out on Terry McLaurin, I'm fine getting the cheaper component there, right? I don't think Terry McLaurin's poorly priced, but I think Samuel's really fairly priced.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're thinking here a like fringe wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, somewhere in that territory.
Yep.
All right. Now you got to pick one of these guys. This one's slightly different. Throwing you a curveball here. Who are you going to draft? Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk? Bob, starting with you.
I'm going to draft Brandon Ayuk. Number one, I trust him to be on the field more. And number two, he seems like the high end, the big play threat. I mean, Deebo Samuel's the more physical, short area, get the ball in his hands, let him do some damage with his physical abilities. And I think that's all well and good. I'd just rather have Ayuk because he will leap over entire piles of people.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely, I think, watch that hurdle at least twice a week. It's possibly my most used GIF on anything, social media. Like, I love Brandon Ayuk. I will have to say, I was visibly upset when we didn't draft Jerry Jeudy and drafted Brandon Ayuk instead. And I've never been more wrong or more happy to be wrong. I love the guy. They knew what they were doing. Trust in John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. From here on out, as far as I'm concerned, Angelo, do you have the correct answer as well? Are you taking Brandon Ayuk?
Oh, 100%. I think he's he could be one of the best receivers in the NFL one day. I mean, he's a lot of room to grow. Super raw talent, but I mean, as Bob said, I mean, the talent's there. I mean, he can be the number one option in that offense because no one can stay healthy there too. We're looking at Samuel. We're looking at Hurd, Kittle, like the backs, Mostert, Wilson. Like none of these guys can stay on the field. So I mean, I think there's no reason why if Ayuk leads that team in targets this year, are we surprised?
I think if
a little bit
George Kittle is healthy an entire season,
that's the question.
But if he leads wide receivers in targets,
not surprised at all.
I'm not surprised. Yes, I mean the thing is, like Kittle doesn't project to play a full season. But if Ayuk plays a full season, I mean I like Ayuk as a talent. But yeah, I would definitely take him over Deebo Samuel for sure.
Well, the good news is the Niners don't play 2 games in a row with the Meadowlands this year, so hopefully the injuries won't quite be so bad. Yep. Just wanted to double check that now that the schedule's out. I mean, that was absolutely insane. Also, absolute insanity is trying to guess what Bruce Arians is going to do with his running back.
Oh, boy.
And Ronald Jones is one of those running backs. Angelo, how do you feel about Ronald Jones for 2021, and are you going to draft him? And more importantly, if you are you going to feel at all good about it?
Oh, man. Bob, go ahead, bro. But Bob, that's all you, brother. I'm going to say no. I don't know. I don't feel good about I mean, especially, man, you got Bernard. I mean, jeez, that's going to be tough. But, Bob, you go ahead, man.
Right. Again, if you're looking for the cheap component, Gio Bernard's the guy. Just wait till round 12 and get the guy who's going to, Tom Brady loves throwing the ball. But look, I think they seem to like Ronald Jones just fine, right? When he's healthy early in the season last year, he got all the run. Fournette was not a factor until Jones got beat up late in the season. And granted, he played really well, Fournette, in the postseason. But I think they're more in on Jones. I just did a draft today, a RotoWire mock for their magazine, and Fournette went a few rounds ahead of Jones.
Yes.
I think I'm fine buying Jones as the cheaper half of that duo, especially if it's cheap enough. But ideally, I'm avoiding it like the plague or like the Texans backfield. Except I'm not. I'm all in on Philip Lindsay. Go.
Yeah.
2 for the price of 1 there. The out on Ronald Jones, the in on Philip Lindsay. I love it. I actually also love that you mentioned that you saw Fournette going ahead because I have done some mocks and some drafts recently, and Fournette noticeably has gone ahead of Ronald Jones. So that might be a trend to watch out on because if you can get him cheap enough, it might be silly to pass on him. Kind of like that one year that Derrick Henry just fell because nobody was like sure on him. They didn't know if those last couple games at the end of the season were fool's gold. And then you're just like going like, okay, I have to take this guy at this point, right? Like, what are we doing here? I think Ronald Jones could be one of those guys. And I'm so surprised that suddenly everyone's back in on Leonard Fournette again. That's honestly the real shock.
Barney Lenny, man. That's, what do we remember? The last thing we saw.
Hey, it's gonna be gonna be a strange backfield. But I'm with Bob, man. It's Gio Bernard's the one I would want because he's the one who's gonna protect Brady. I mean, that means a big deal. We look at what James White did there.
Right, the catch rates were trouble for Jones and Fournette, just generally speaking, last year. So, I mean, I think that's a big key for me, and that's why Gio Bernard's there. Sorry, Keyshawn Vaughn, we hardly.
Yeah, he's bye-bye. I mean, there's no – that's tough.
Arian said he expects a breakout year this year from Keyshawn Vaughn. And
He
I see
expects
no
one from
reason,
me too, though, by the way.
I see no reason why we can't trust Bruce Arians when he talks about running backs ever. Okay, someone who maybe we can trust, though, is Gabriel Davis, later season semi-breakout. We saw some flashes. There was some excitement, especially a guy who did the most with his limited targets, I felt. Bob, are you targeting Gabriel Davis? Do you think he'll have a good season?
I have not. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't. Right time, right place, right draft. I'll have shares of him in best ball for sure. I think that's where he's an ideal play because you don't have to, worry about the consistent production. But I think the locked-in connection, right, already for, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, assuming he's still around, that he hasn't run himself off. Brandon Beane has problems with Cole Beasley, and he hasn't even said that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, no, but I mean, we heard Brandon Beane saying, "Well, if someone's not vaccinated, if I'm making a roster decision." So I don't think that'll actually come into play. I think Cole Beasley will be fine again this year. But I think Davis is a guy that maybe people are going to overdraft a little bit based on the flashes of excitement last year. I'm not going to overinvest in him.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's turning into a very interesting offense because your top three receivers are Emmanuel Sanders, Stephon Diggs, and Cole Beasley. And it's turning into a timing-based offense with Josh Allen's ascent into one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. These guys this is not the big physical wide receiver groups that we're used to seeing in the NFL. And Gabriel Davis might be the odd man out. He doesn't have super high draft capital. They're not tied to him long term. I don't see if he sees anything more than situational touches. I like him as a player. I liked him coming out, but I just don't see how he gets significant target share in that offense.
So are you guys then more sold on Emmanuel Sanders being a particularly used part of this offense? Because for me, I think there's perhaps a little bit of overhype on Emmanuel Sanders, and I think Gabe Davis has an opportunity to take over that John Brown when healthy role. And we could see John Brown still perform in Buffalo alongside Stephon Diggs. The brief moments where he was healthy, again, they were brief. The sample size is small. We saw Gabe Davis pick up a little of that. I do get your guys' concerns, but is part of that also because you're slightly in on Emmanuel Sanders in that offense?
I am not. I mean, okay. He's good. He's a good player, savvy veteran. My expectations are not high for him. I'm drafting the guys that I know are getting the workload. I mean, Davis could. I mean, I think there's other guys there that also could, right?
That's totally fair.
I think it was right place, right time for him last year. Maybe he established something. Maybe he didn't. Is it something I want to invest in? Not until very late in drafts, if I do it at all. And again, best ball, I think he's a solid play because he does have a little affinity for the end zone.
Totally fair.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think it's best ball is kind of the best place for him. Yes, I'm not sold on Emmanuel Sanders being a consistent contributor in that offense, but I think he'll probably see the field more than Davis does. I just think he's a better option for Allen. I think what they're trying to do is surround him with consistent, reliable weapons. I think Davis has some growing to do. I think he showed flashes of being a really good player, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting offense to see, but I think at X receiver next year we're going to see. I think we're going to see them take a player pretty early.
Okay, I like it. I like it a lot. All right,
around, yeah.
Last wide receiver and last guy for player rating, Tyler Boyd, possibly the odd man out or the value buy of the century. I think it's kind of one or the other. Angelo, your thoughts on Tyler Boyd? What are your expectations in 2021? And are you going to buy on what I think will be a pretty cheap asset?
I think I'm buying it's a pretty massive dip. It's tough because it's a very obviously we have the Chase and Higgins, and I think Chase is the alpha now. I think yeah. I mean you're not going to take a guy in the top 5 and not target him. Higgins is there too. I think he's a really good player. Boyd is also a very good slot receiver. I think he's the safety blanket for Joe Burrow. They don't really have a tight end that fits that mold. So I think this could be a semi-frustrating fantasy offense for receivers. But I think Tyler Boyd puts up maybe back-end wide receiver 3 numbers. I think that's in the cards. I think in PPR especially, I think we're really looking at him. I think if we're playing half point or standard, then I don't think, you're not going to – if he scores more than 4 touchdowns, are we – I don't think really betting on the touchdown upside with Boyd with how big of red zone presence is Higgins and Chase are.
Yeah, Bob, what are your thoughts? I would agree with Angelo that it's definitely a guy who's better in PPRs post-standard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't touch him in standard, but yeah. I think he's going mid-range, wide receiver 3, 29, wide receiver 29 on calculator right now. So about a 6th-round play.
Right.
I think that's reasonable. Chase is going later. I'd probably be buying Chase at about, around – I think he's going at wide receiver 50 right now in redraft.
Which is insane. Do you think that honestly is what we should expect come August when
we'll see what happens? No, probably not. I mean, it's probably more people are drafting and that just paying attention to draft capital and things like that. Also, I mean, we're going to project that Justin Jefferson kind of emergence, especially playing with the guy he played with at college. So I think there's a lot of things to like about that. So if he's the cheapest piece of that puzzle, I'll be buying that piece. I'll probably be buying the cheapest piece of this offense, that I can get. And I'm fine with Mixon in round 2. I'll be fine with, Higgins is going a little earlier than I want to go right now because I'm a little higher on Chase. But honestly, if it ends up Higgins being a cheap commodity, I'll be all over that.
With the volume in that offense, and just it's a quick yes or no from you guys, is it impossible that Tyler Boyd is the Juju Smith-Schuster of that offense, which would be a wide receiver 2?
Not impossible, but I don't. It depends on, honestly, if they have negative script in a lot of games, then we could see that. But I'm not banking on it.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't bank on that quite that high numbers. But I think it is in the range of possible outcomes, right? Like if we're looking at the broad spectrum, there's certainly not like a crazy, like if it happened, I wouldn't be sitting here going, wow, that's the most shocking thing ever.
But definitely still ceiling though at that point.
I think so.
Okay, that's I don't disagree. I just think it's something to keep in mind, given that we had a game where Joe Burrow threw the ball 60 times. And I think
and he got hit 47.
Yeah, it's like that team is not going to be good next year. No. It might be weirdly competitive. It might shock some people a little, but the defense is still going to be bad, I think. And that O-line is going to have some issues, and Joe Burrow is going to have to throw the ball a lot and possibly very quickly. And I think it's entirely feasible that he'll trust his boy, Jamar Chase, and then maybe the slot safety blanket and Tyler Boyd. And I would agree with Bob that it's get the cheapest piece of that high-octane offense you can, and most likely it'll be a great value. Speaking of some great values, let's get into some redraft position sleepers, and I just want one guy per position. It can be a rookie, it can be a vet, just literally anyone for redraft. And so we're going to start with QB. Bob, who you got?
Why is Ryan Tannehill even a sleeper still? I mean, every year, last August, I'm going, how is he going at quarterback 20? Right? Not I get it. There's a lot of reasons for that, the possibility of some regression. But I mean, he's been quarterback 7 since he's took over as a starter, right? Or higher. Yeah. So he's the guy that I'm still drafting, very late and enjoying. And what I'm doing is I'm drafting Aaron Rodgers, jumping up around, going all in on that because I think he's going to be back and other people probably don't. And then I'll back that up. You got to mitigate the risk with that. And I think Ryan Tannehill's a fine way to do that. He's turned into a good player. And I think I don't think the new offensive coordinator coming in there, Todd Downing, is going to forget, I don't think we're going to abandon the scheme. They just need to find some new pieces.
Totally makes sense. And I have always felt Ryan Tannehill, over the past 2 years, rather, Ryan Tannehill wins you championships. He is an excellent sleeper QB. Angelo, I'm going to ask for someone different. That's my only thing here. If someone takes the first one, so you're going to get the first opportunity on running back, just pick someone different. That's all I ask. You can obviously still agree, though, with the other guy's pick. So who's your guy at QB?
Oh, I'm going to stick with the Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Love it.
I think, man, I mean,
At least for 8 weeks, I love it.
It's a ton of weapons. I mean, I don't like the thing is like who's gonna succeed him immediatally?
That's fair.
That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, if
Heineke looked surprisingly spry in that playoff game against the Bucks.
He
who
did.
won the Super Bowl.
I don't know, man. It's one of those situations where, I mean, if they would have traded up and gotten Lance or been aggressive to go get Fields when he fell.
And I felt it was noticeable that they weren't.
That's what I'm saying too. I think they're banking on 2022 and either free agency happening or via trade. But I think in 2021, Ryan Fitzpatrick's an absolute smash at where he's going in drafts.
Love it. All right, running back. Who you got for your sleeper?
Oh man, Rashad Penny.
Interesting.
I think that's an interesting one because can one of them stay healthy? That's what we're looking at if it's not Carson, it's Penny. If it's not Penny, it's Carson. Yeah. But we haven't really seen him play a full year with a touch share of any kind. But when he's been on the field, he's looked good. If the injuries are behind him, he could be a steal. But he's kind of one of those guys I'm looking at. Another one it's not a great one, but Zach Moss.
Yeah.
They didn't draft a back.
I like that one more.
They didn't draft a
Moss
back.
Is more likely to contribute.
I think Penny's riskier. Yes. I think he could have a boom, but I think Zach Moss is more likely to return value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I 1,000%.
Yeah, I think with Moss, he's going to get the goal line work. I don't think that goes to Devin Singletary.
Josh Allen is going to get the goal line.
That is also, you know what? Here's kind of my thought. I think there comes a point in time when you have to protect your quarterback. I mean, you got to find a way to, you know what I mean? I mean, that's tough, but I think
this is a team whose fan base is known for diving into tables, though.
That is true.
Like 8 to 6 total rushing touchdowns for Allen and the combined.
Yes,
it's absolutely
wild.
Insane.
But yeah, I think Moss is I guess a higher floor option there that I think will return value.
By the way, I have to say, someone along that Josh Allen quarterback used as the goal line back that people should keep an eye on, I think particularly in redraft, is Justin Herbert. I think will actually be kind of used in that
Let's
situation.
Stick his helmet in somebody's chest.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right, Bob, running back, who you got? Cannot be either of those two guys.
Right. All my Chris Carson shares are shaking their fists. So I'll go with Philip Lindsay because I mentioned him earlier, but I think he's the best back in Houston right now. All due respect to David Johnson, right? So and Mark Ingram, they're obviously they've done some great things. It just haven't seen it for a while from David Johnson. We see it every time Philip Lindsay steps on the field, and nobody believes he can do it.
Yeah, I love Philip Lindsay. We literally, before you hopped on in the green room, before we started, spent probably 3 to 5 minutes talking about Philip Lindsay is awesome. And definitely one of those undrafted free agent guys that popped. He's got 2,000 plus yard seasons already under his belt. Denver passed on him. It felt weird at the time. Still feels a little weird though. Now that they've got Javonte Williams, much less weird.
Yep.
That backfield is anyone's to take. Now, granted, I don't know if that coach is going to be any good. I don't know what kind of run system he's going to use. If he literally rotates them per play as opposed to per series or based on that franchise is so incompetent, nothing would shock me.
Right. You're hoping that Tim Kelly gives a little continuity at the offensive coordinator, gets a little continuity in what they're doing. But honestly, I just can't see David Johnson carrying that offense.
No. I'll be happy if David Johnson stays healthy enough to get the shot to carry that offense. And I think that's a big boost for Lindsay as well, who I think had a nagging injury last year. And, hopefully this year he'll have had the time to rehab that pesky turf toe and be back on the field. Speaking of people on the field, wide receivers, Bob, who you guys are wide receiver redrafts?
By the way, I have a turf toe older than both of you combined, so I don't know that that's actually
okay. Well, now I'm nervous. All right.
My easy answer is John Brown because there's two things you can't coach: size and speed. He has more of half of that than pretty much anyone else around, but he can never stay on the field. So. There's so many guys I like. I think Deshaun Jackson's a guy that nobody's drafting. If you're playing best ball and you're in round 12, throw a flyer out on Deshaun Jackson. There's a reason he's in Los Angeles. quarterback with a big arm, and so I'm gonna say that, and maybe Tutu Atwell can, well, probably not.
Tutu's an interesting one. I've definitely heard some people speak highly of him. The question is like, will he ever get enough production to be fantasy relevant? And I think even the people who are bullish on him are kind of leaning no, or at least we're going to have to wait and see.
We'll see.
Angelo, who are we not necessarily going to have to wait and see, though? A sleeper you are confident on at wide receiver. Give me something.
Darnell Mooney. I mean, I'm a Bears fan, and the amount of times I watched Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky just overthrow, underthrow. I mean, the kid's talented, and we very well might see Anthony Miller out of town.
I was about to ask you that.
I don't see him as a Chicago Bear. I know they've grown frustrated with his, lack of professionalism, maturity, and his inability to understand and to understand Matt Nagy's offense and what his role is and being in the right place at the right time. Mooney from day one started, which was shocking, I think, to a lot of people because in COVID, this is no rookie minicamp, no OTAs. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who came in, worked his tail off to understand what's going on in the field, and started from day one in 12 personnel, which is crazy to me. Yeah. And he looked great. He looked great during the season. There's the clips of him, getting the best of some of the better cornerbacks in the NFL, like Jalen Ramsey. But I think it's going to be a really interesting target once Justin Fields is the starting quarterback. I don't think Justin Fields starts week 1. I hope he does as a Bears fan.
That's fair.
I could see them not starting him week 1. But
all right, call your shot. When do you see him starting him? Just give me a week.
4.
Ooh, that's early, but I like it.
I think you have to. I don't think you can win games with. You can't win games with Dalton back there.
Andy Dalton's already the winningest quarterback ever in Chicago Bears history.
Bob, don't do it to me now. Don't do it to me now.
I love it.
It's facts. The man's speaking, though. The man's speaking.
That deserves the big facts button.
That is big facts, though. That's real big. But
yeah, you just don't know if he's going to be the Red Rifle, the redheaded stepchild from.
Yeah, you have no idea. But at least, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, Dave Montgomery. Yeah. He has a good nucleus to work with. Yep. But when Justin Fields starts, Darnell Mooney stock up because
everybody stock up. I think
100%. Yeah. Allen Robinson is going to have a monster year.
He can burn his quarterback proof card.
Oh my God! Finally, the poor guy. He was
a top 8 wide receiver last year.
Wow,
with junk thrown to him.
Yes,
he is so talented. It keeps me up at night knowing that I will not get nearly enough Allen Robinson stock in my life.
That offense got so bad at one point. It was literally all right. Play action, 2 things: play action or to give David Montgomery the ball. That's what it was. That was literally it. Yeah. And it was brutal. But now they actually have a competent quarterback. Justin Fields is an all-pro caliber prospect. I could not be happier as a Chicago Bears fan.
Yeah, and I don't see a reason why you can't be happy. It's looking like a very solid team. They did a really good job. I think Pace finally impressed some people.
Yeah, impressed me.
Let's see if
I'm surprised he got that second shot, but it happened.
Yeah. I am too, honestly. I thought they were done with them.
Yeah.
I thought Riddick was gonna. I thought honestly for a minute Riddick was gonna be the.
Look, Khan got the same thing in Arizona. Sometimes you get that second chance.
Yeah. That's true.
All right, let's see if you can't keep impressing me, Angelo. Tight end. Who's your sleeper?
Oh man, does Adam Trautman count?
Yes, it absolutely counts.
I'm gonna say Adam. I like to put on Dayton too. He was actually my tight end 1 in last year's class because he's a good football player, man. He's a guy. He's a good route runner. He's a good blocker. It depends on who's throwing the football. If it's Jameis Winston and they're airing that sucker out, shoot, there's targets left over. Who's the second option in that offense besides Kamara? We don't know.
So you got Michael Thomas. You got Adam Marquez.
Yeah, there's really no one.
Yeah, no. Trautman makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, there's no Emmanuel Sanders. Are we banking on Traquan Smith? I mean, no. So there's a lot there, especially in the red zone. I mean, this is a team that if Jameis Winston, the one thing I know is if Jameis Winston's on the field, they're going to score points.
This is true,
and they're going to throw the ball, and they might make a ton of mistakes, but they're going to get red zone opportunities. So I think that's a big one for Adam Troutman. I think he has a chance to be if he's tight end 6, tight end 7. Are we really that shocked?
I'll be a little shocked by that. If he's tight end 12, I'm with Bob here.
I think tight end 7. I think for me with Troutman, I think the landscape's. I mean, it's without.
My concern would be if it's Taysom Hill, are we counting on the tight end to tight end connection?
No.
And then if it's Jameis Winston, he's not someone that historically targets the tight end a ton. I think Sean Payton will.
That's my banking work.
But Jameis is going to want to get a little frisky with it.
Exactly.
So for me, as much as I love Troutman, him passing some guys who I think are more talented, like Noah Fant, for example, who for me is someone that you're currently projecting to be that tight end.
Where do you have Fant? Do you have him around 5?
Anywhere in the 6 to 8 range is where I have him personally. An interesting tight end sleeper just came up in the comments. Bob, I'm going to see if you picked this guy though. Who's your tight end sleeper?
Blake Jarwin.
Okay, so it's not Anthony Fersker with no job.
I mean, I don't even know if he's a sleeper anymore because I mean he's the guy.
Okay, I like this. I like this. I think that is fair.
I mean, you're drafting him still fairly late. No one is like buying all into this. I think Ferkser's fine. I just think Jarwin's kind of the forgotten commodity. I'm saying this because I got him in the last, I think it was my last pick in that RotoWire draft, or second to the last pick. We had to draft kickers. So just look, I mean, the tight end's going to see heavy usage in Dallas. Dak Prescott, turns out he's a very good quarterback when he's in the locked and upright position. There's a lot to like about this. And I think he'll be heavily targeted. And the guy that you can, like, if you miss out on the top tier and you're out there, sloshing through the shallow part of the sea of mediocrity, he might rise above that.
Yeah, Blake Jarwin, if he finishes tight end 12, it won't shock me at all. If I project him to be tight end 12 in my rankings, it won't shock me at all. He feels like a perfect low-cost guy where you have historical usage at the position for that offense. You have a good quarterback.
Right.
You have a defense that has gotten better, but it's still going to take some time. I don't think they're suddenly going to be like world beating and make it so that Dak Prescott isn't still having to put the team on his back. And they paid Blake Jarwin. I think people really forget that they paid Blake Jarwin. Like he's getting millions upon millions of dollars a year. He's another guy with, I know we're talking redraft, but I'll just really quick dynasty note. Blake Jarwin might be on your waivers, depending on how deep your dynasty league is because of that injury. You need to check and go get him. And then if he's not, go get Adam Troutman, because that's another guy that might weirdly be on your waivers.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Yeah, it's an interesting, I think, with Jameis. I mean, if Jameis takes the field, I think that could be an interesting one
for sure.
If he's, I like Troutman a ton. So like I have him as high as 7, as low as like 18.
I liked him the first time I saw him when he was Dan Arnold.
Dan Arnold. How about Dan Arnold? So what? Like, I think he's a good sleeper too.
The landing spot. Look,
I don't like the landing spot.
I'm like 5 years ahead on some of these guys. Will Dissly is,
Little Seattle action, yeah.
Right.
So, as someone who did like a deep dive on Ian Thomas and was like, hey, this is a guy you can get for basically nothing, who could be partnered with Teddy Bridgewater, who might throw to the tight end.
Yeah.
He's done some with his, and it was like
Dan Arnold's a little more though athletic downfield, right? So
he's a receiver. I mean, he was a receiver in college too. So I mean, and he, out of UW Platteville. So I mean, he's a guy that is going to be deployed at receiver. He's not a tight end. He is very much not.
It'll be interesting, but I think there's some other guys that you can still
100%. 100%.
We're dart tossing.
That's a real big dart.
For me, I gotta see where's ADP lands. But Jared Cook in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
For half the year.
It's like, for me, I think he could be someone that gets a lot of touchdown looks.
My Donald Parham shares. I hate that.
I wanted Parham to be a thing. I really did.
I think everybody did. You kind of have to root for that too, right?
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Bob. DST. who is the DST that you're going to be targeting late? Because why not? Let's talk about some defense. Let's talk about some kickers.
I don't know if I'm going late. I mean, I don't know how late is late, but I think the Patriots are going to be a lot better, and they were lousy last year, and people are going to forget that like 8,000 guys opted out, and that some of them will be back, and they've spent a lot of money, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. So, you know, and just as an aside, I'm told their coaching staff is really good.
I hadn't heard that. I thought they were like some new guys, some like up and comers. I didn't know they were. Okay. I'll have to keep an eye out on their coach. Maybe he'll have a Hall of Fame career. We'll see. But all joking aside, I think it's also important. You talk about like all the guys who opted out, all the guys who are coming back. That includes their best player on defense, who was out for the entire season. Angelo, DST, you're targeting late.
Man, I don't know if it's late because honestly, I don't
late enough.
I don't play in a lot of leagues that have DST, but the one I'm targeting everywhere is the Denver Broncos. I mean, I like Fangio in Chicago, big fan. They added Fuller. They get a healthy Miller. You know, they have, you know, they spent their first round pick on a corner. They have a really good secondary. They have an elite pass rusher. I mean, I'm kind of all in on the Denver defense if I'm drafting. My home league's actually one with DST, so I'm definitely targeting the Broncos there. But yeah, it's an interesting like them. The Cleveland Browns are going to be a really good DST this year.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not sure they'll end up being a sleeper. But
yeah, they're definitely not a sleeper, but
I think there's someone you have to target for sure.
They're going to be pretty high end. But yeah, I think the Broncos are one of mine. That I don't think they're like a true sleeper, but I think they'll do better than return value.
Yeah. Real quick, possibly spicy take. Bob, Angelo, would it shock you if Cleveland was actually the better fantasy defense than the Pittsburgh Steelers, their division rivals? Because I think there's maybe some pieces that are falling apart in that defense.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I don't expect it, but it wouldn't shock me because Pittsburgh. I mean, the bar is so high. So,
okay,
Angelo, what about you? Any thoughts?
No, it wouldn't really shock me. I mean, I think with the pass rushers that Cleveland has now, sacks. That's really it, right? So, I mean, I think we're talking about defense that's going to get a lot of sacks. It's going to force turnovers. So it wouldn't shock me at all. I think the Steelers have, for whatever reason, struggled to stay healthy. So I think that's the big factor there.
All right. Well, let's get into the last one of the evening, an area that fantasy lovers it's the thing that gets us ready for the draft, the position we love the most. Of course, the kicker. Angelo, who is your kicker sleeper?
Oh my gosh.
Kicker sleeper? Kicker sleeper. Because I've got one.
Oh man. Does Cairo Santos count as a sleeper?
Well, he's got the job, so yes.
I'll take him. I mean, I think I play in one league with the kicker, but I like Carlos Santos. I think as a Chicago Bears fan, watching him and compared to every other kicker we've had, and thank you
that won't hit the post.
Thank you for that. It's funny because I was actually at that game, sitting behind Eagles fans, and I kid you not, that sound of that hitting the post was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it was terrifying. It was a very bad few days after. But hopefully we don't have a kicker that hits the post. But yeah, I think the Bears are going to be a higher scoring offense this year than they were in years past. The only issue is they have a really tough slate of games. But that'll actually be good for the kicker position too, because they might not be, like red zone opportunities might turn into kicking opportunities. So we'll see.
I think if you have Justin Fields running that offense, you could have a high-powered offense that hits a couple weird roadblocks, which is a good recipe for kickers. Bob, who you got as your kicker sleeper?
So I guess I'll go. There's a couple. Tyler Bass. I think playing him alongside Buffalo, but the problem there is the weather. So have at least part of the year. So I'll go with the guy who the weather won't be an issue, and Ryan Suckup. Just seeing Tom Brady talking today about how he struggled to learn the playbook until very late in the year. This offense might have room to grow. And that's all I'm looking for in a kicker, right? Guy with a really good offense. I think Tampa Bay's offense is going to be pretty damn good this year.
Yeah, for me personally, it has to be the only kicker that was taken in the 2021 draft. That was Evan McPherson, taken by the Cincinnati Bengals, who had Randy Bullock as like kicker one in fantasy for a serious stretch of the 2020 season. It's a high profile, it's a high powered offense, not a great defense, plenty of opportunity. Again, like, Joe Burrow out there throwing the ball 60 times a game, like McPherson might get a chance to kick a field goal like 4 or 5 times a game because like they just can't quite get it there. So he's someone that really intrigues me, especially because like there's people who aren't going to know who he is in your draft. And so if you're drafting kickers, like that could be someone like, why spend any draft capital at all on Justin Tucker, where you could get someone with a ton of opportunities for literally your last pick in the draft.
I just realized I'm wearing my flex shirt somewhere. Jake Seeley can like sense that we're talking about kickers. And he's really pissed off.
Well, hopefully he's not too upset, but hopefully he tuned in, because I would love it if Mr. Seeley watched this show. And I'm glad so many people did tune in to watch this show, because you guys have been phenomenal guests. It has meant so much to have you guys on. You are both like, part of what I love about doing this show is I get to bring on people who are way smarter than me and mostly listen to them talk. And then I get to learn while doing something that I love. And I get to share it with some awesome people. So again, thank you guys so much. Angelo, why don't you go ahead, plug some upcoming content that you got, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, first, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you and Herms reaching out, man. I truly do. It's been a ton of fun. And Bob, man, you're a pioneer, brother. I mean, it's been awesome chatting with you and chopping it up. And you can find me, at angelanalysis.com or on Twitter at Angelo_fantasy, man. It's a fun time of year, kind of finishing up the rookie draft profiles, getting those out. I know Kenneth Gainwell, Elijah Moore, and Trey Sermon are probably going to be the next few that come out. And I'm excited to keep those going, then dive into some of the 2022 and 2023 prospects for Devy.
Awesome. And then Bob, I mean, as Angelo said, you are a pioneer. You are a legend. It means the world to have you on the show. Cannot thank you enough, especially coming straight from your other show. Where can the people find you if for some reason they don't already know? And what you got coming up?
As a pioneer, I have my covered wagon parked out to the side, and we will jump it there. No. It's great. Had a great time. Nice to meet you, Angelo. The thing about this industry that keeps it interesting and exciting is just the number of really smart people who I run across every single time I turn around. And if I could pick my 30-pound cat up and swing him around, I would hit one, I'm sure. But no, this is what I love about this, is meeting people who really put a lot of thought into this. I'll be on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio most every day. It's hard to escape me, so I apologize for that. You can find me at footballdiehards.com as well. I'm working on our magazines right now. 32nd year of the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast. The Football Diehards, I think we're over 20 years of that magazine, well over 20 years on the cheat sheets and the draft book. So we're doing a full slate of magazines this year after last year, kind of dialing back to 2. So that's an ongoing project, and follow me on Twitter at Football Diehard.
Awesome. I'm not even in my 32nd year of being me. So like that is beyond impressive to say the least.
You and me both. Yeah.
All right. Well, I am your host, McLateral, aka at McLateralFF on the Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me at our blog, which is thelateralff.com. You can find our latest written content there. You can find our videos on YouTube. You can find our audio on Spotify. This should go up on Spotify right now. We're running into just a slight technical hiccup there, but we should be back on track. You'll definitely be able to find this on YouTube later, though. And I think the thing we got really coming up over at The Lateral is we're going to get some, hopefully not way too early, but definitely way too early rankings out for redraft, because that is our primary focus. So stay tuned for that. And then I have actually, I think, some guests coming next week. I'm going to vamp a little here because I really should have remembered that before getting to this point in the show. But they're so awesome that I couldn't forget to mention. I've got Cody from Real Deal Fantasy coming in, and Chris Robin, aka Detroit Beastie from Fantasy Twitter. So that's going to be next week. Keep an eye out for that. But again, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
It's been a blast. And I think that is it. And with that, we're